I thought I knew my son, until the doctor showed me what his wife had been putting in my medicine. I'm Patricia Callahan, 68 years old, and I've spent the last 43 years believing I understood my son better than anyone else in this world. I changed his diapers when he had colic that kept us both awake for 3 months straight. I sat through every parent-teacher conference, every soccer game, every piano recital where he played the same stumbling version of FR at least 6 times over 3 years. I held his hand through his father's funeral when he was only 19, watched him struggle to become the man of the house before he was ready, celebrated when he graduated from Arizona State with honors in engineering. I thought I knew every corner of his heart, every shadow in his mind, every value I'd worked so hard to instill in him during those formative years. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday morning in late September when Dr. Anand Patel sat across from me in his office at Desert Valley Medical Center, his dark eyes troubled behind wire-rimmed glasses, and explained to me that the symptoms I'd been experiencing for the past 7 months, the dizziness, the tremors in my hands, the confusion that made me forget my own phone number, the weakness that left me barely able to climb the 3 steps to my front door weren't from the degenerative neurological condition he'd initially suspected, the toxicology report he'd ordered on a hunch, after I'd mentioned in passing that my symptoms seemed worse after I took my morning medications, revealed something that made his hands shake as he held the paper. "Mrs. Callahan," he said, his voice heavy with an emotion I couldn't quite identify, "there are significant levels of diphenhydramine in your system, much higher than anything you've been prescribed." I stared at him, my mind sluggish from months of whatever had been happening to me. Diphen what? Antihistamine, Benadryl, essentially. In large doses, over time, it can cause exactly the symptoms you've been experiencing. Confusion, memory problems, difficulty with balance, tremors. He paused, and I could see him choosing his words carefully. "Mrs. Callahan, according to your chart, you're not prescribed any antihistamines. You don't have allergies. There's no reason this medication should be in your system at all, let alone at these levels." The office suddenly felt too small, the afternoon sun streaming through the window too bright. My home health aide, a kind woman named Rosario, who'd been driving me to appointments for the past 3 months, sat beside me and reached for my hand. "Are you saying someone is giving her this medication without her knowing?" Rosario asked, her accent thickening with alarm. Dr. Patel's silence was answer enough. That moment sitting in that too bright office, feeling Rosario's calloused hand gripping mine, watching Dr. Patel's face as he struggled with what he was suggesting, that was when my world began to fracture. Because there was only one person who had access to my medications, who prepared my morning pills in the little plastic organizer every Sunday evening, who insisted on doing it himself because he said it gave him peace of mind to know his mother was being cared for properly. My son, Michael. My only child. The boy I'd sacrificed everything to raise alone after his father's heart attack left us with nothing but a house with a reverse mortgage and $63,000 in medical debt. But it wasn't just Michael, was it? It was Michael and his wife, Amber, the daughter-in-law, who'd moved into my house 2 years ago when they claimed they were between places, who'd never left, who'd slowly taken over my kitchen, my living room, my entire life with her bright smile and her constant suggestions about what I should eat, how I should organize my pills, when I should rest. "I need you to bring in all your medications," Dr. Patel said, pulling out his prescription pad. "Everything, the bottles, the organizer, anything you take regularly. Don't tell anyone you're doing this. Just bring them to the lab downstairs. We need to test them." I nodded, but my mind was already racing ahead to the implications of what he was suggesting, to the impossible question that I couldn't yet bring myself to fully form. Would my own son poison me? The answer, I would discover over the next 3 weeks, was far more complicated and infinitely more devastating than I could have imagined. Let me take you back to where this really began. To the point where I can see now with the brutal clarity of hindsight the first thread started to unravel. It was 14 months before that doctor's appointment, in July of the previous year, when Michael first brought up the idea of moving back home. He was 36 then, married to Amber for 3 years, working as a mechanical engineer at Honeywell Aerospace. We were sitting on my back patio in the suburb of Scottsdale where I'd lived for 32 years. In the house I'd bought with my late husband Daniel when Michael was just 2 years old. The desert heat had broken with the evening, and the sunset was painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that reminded me why I'd never left Arizona despite the summers that felt like living in an oven. The apartment complex is raising our rent again, Michael said, his voice casual but his eyes not meeting mine. 15% increase. It's getting impossible to save for a house with these prices. I took a sip of my iced tea, watching him over the rim of my glass. He looked so much like his father in that moment, the same strong jaw, the same way of setting his shoulders when he was working up to asking for something. How much is the increase? Another $300 a month. We'd be paying $2,400 for a 2-bedroom. He finally looked at me then, and I could see the calculation in his eyes, the carefully rehearsed argument. I know this is a lot to ask, Mom, but Amber and I were wondering if we could move in here temporarily, just for 6 months, maybe 8, until we can save enough for a down payment. I should have said no. Looking back now, I can see all the reasons why I should have protected my space, my independence, the life I'd carefully rebuilt after Daniel's death. But Michael was my son, and I'd spent 36 years unable to refuse him anything when he looked at me with those eyes that were so achingly like his father's. Temporarily, I heard myself say, 6 months maximum. The relief on his face seemed genuine then. He got up and hugged me, and I felt the familiar comfort of my child's embrace, the smell of his cologne mixing with the evening desert air. Thank you, Mom. You have no idea how much this means to us. We'll help with everything: groceries, utilities, housework. You won't even know we're here. That was the first lie, though I didn't recognize it as such at the time. They moved in on a Saturday in August, Amber orchestrating the whole operation with military precision. She was 32 years old, with honey blonde hair she wore in a perpetually perfect ponytail, and a smile that looked like it belonged in a toothpaste commercial. She worked as a medical billing specialist at Banner Health, which I initially thought was a responsible profession. She brought boxes and boxes of their belongings, far more than seemed necessary for a temporary stay. I'm so grateful for this, Patricia, she said, calling me by my first name in that overly familiar way she had. I promise we'll make this work for everyone, and it'll be so nice for you to have company. This house is way too big for one person. I'd lived alone in this house for 8 years since Daniel's death, and I'd never found it too big. I'd found it comforting, filled with memories, every room a reminder of the life we'd built. But I smiled and nodded and told her I was happy to help. The first month was fine, better than fine, actually. Michael seemed lighter, less stressed than he'd been in years. Amber cooked elaborate meals and insisted I join them, her conversation bright and cheerful as she talked about her day at work, about her plans for their future. She asked me questions about my life, about my 34 years working as a bookkeeper for a chain of hardware stores before I retired, about my friendship with my neighbor Gloria Chen, who I'd known since Michael was in elementary school. You're so interesting, Patricia, she'd say, her blue eyes wide with what looked like genuine fascination. I hope I'm as independent and capable as you when I'm your age. I was 67 then, hardly ancient, but I appreciated the compliment, or what I thought was a compliment. The second month, small things started to change. Amber began organizing my kitchen, moving my dishes to different cabinets because it makes more sense to have the everyday plates closer to the dishwasher. She rearranged my pantry, threw out spices she declared too old, replaced my regular coffee with a flavored vanilla blend she preferred. When I protested mildly, she laughed and said, "Oh, Patricia, you'll love these changes once you get used to them. I'm just trying to make things more efficient." Michael said nothing during these reorganizations, just smiled when Amber looked at him for support, and I found myself swallowing my objections because I didn't want to seem ungrateful or inflexible. They were helping me, after all. They were paying $300 a month toward groceries and utilities, which Amber made sure to mention at least twice a week. "We're really grateful you're only charging us $300, she'd say. "Do you know how much we'd be paying anywhere else? You're being so generous," except I hadn't charged them anything. The $300 was their offer, and it didn't begin to cover the increase in my utility bills, the extra water, the air conditioning running constantly, because Amber liked the house at 68 degrees even in the desert summer. But I didn't say anything. I just nodded and accepted their gratitude like it was something I'd earned. The third month, Amber started expressing concern about my health. It started small. "Patricia, are you feeling okay? You seem tired, or did you take your blood pressure medicine today? I noticed you forgot yesterday morning, or, at your age, you really should be more careful about climbing up on step stools. What if you fell?" I was on blood pressure medication and a statin for cholesterol, nothing unusual for a woman my age. I'd been managing these medications for 6 years without any problems, but Amber's constant attention to my pill-taking made me second-guess myself. Had I taken my morning pills? I usually took them with breakfast, but now that Amber was making breakfast, timing was different. The routine I'd followed for years was disrupted, and I found myself confused about whether I'd already taken my medication or not. "I have an idea," Amber announced one Sunday evening in October, pulling out a plastic weekly pill organizer she'd bought at the pharmacy. "Michael and I were talking, and we think it would be better if we helped you organize your pills. That way, you don't have to worry about forgetting or double dosing. We'll fill this every Sunday, and you'll just take what's in each day's compartment. Doesn't that sound easier?" I looked at Michael, expecting him to recognize how patronizing this was, how unnecessary, but he just nodded enthusiastically. "It's a good idea, Mom. I worry about you getting confused with all these bottles." All these bottles. I took exactly 3 medications, but the way they said it made it sound like I was managing a pharmacy's worth of pills, like I was somehow incapable of handling this basic aspect of my own care. "I can manage my own medications," I said, trying to keep my voice light even though I felt a flutter of indignation in my chest. "Of course you can," Amber said quickly, her smile never faltering. "This is just to make things easier. You do so much, Patricia. Let us help with this one small thing, please." And because I'd been raised to be gracious, because I didn't want to seem difficult or ungrateful, because Michael was looking at me with those eyes that still melted my heart, I agreed. That night, Amber and Michael sat at my kitchen table, the kitchen table where I'd helped Michael with his homework for 12 years, where Daniel and I had shared thousands of meals, where I'd sat alone after Daniel died and wondered how I'd managed to keep going, and emptied my 3 prescription bottles into that plastic organizer. They were chatty and casual, telling me about their day while they worked, and I watched them with a feeling I couldn't quite name. Something that wasn't quite suspicion but wasn't quite comfort either. Something that whispered in the back of my mind that I was losing control of my own life, piece by small piece. "There," Amber said brightly, snapping the lid closed on the organizer. "All set for the week. You just take whatever's in Monday's compartment tomorrow morning, then Tuesday's on Tuesday, and so on. Simple." "I understand how a pill organizer works," I said, and I heard the edge in my own voice, sharp enough that Amber's smile flickered for just a second. "Of course you do," she said smoothly. "I didn't mean to imply, just want to make sure we're all on the same page." That was the phrase she used constantly, on the same page, as if we were collaborating on some project, as if my life and my health were team efforts that required her input and oversight. The 4th month was November, and that's when I started feeling different. It was subtle at first, a slight dizziness when I stood up too quickly, moments where I walked into a room and forgot why I'd gone. They're not unusual for anyone, really, but happening more frequently. My hands would shake slightly when I poured my morning coffee. I mentioned it to Dr. Patel at my regular checkup, and he attributed it to age and stress. "You're in good health for 67, Patricia," he assured me. "Blood pressure is controlled, cholesterol is good. These minor symptoms are normal, but let me know if they get worse." They did get worse. By December, I was feeling dizzy almost every day, especially in the mornings after I took my medications. I'd have to sit down for 10 or 15 minutes until the room stopped spinning. My thinking felt fuzzy, like I was trying to see through gauze. I'd lose my train of thought mid-sentence. I'd forget appointments I'd written clearly on my calendar. "Mom, are you sure you're okay?" Michael asked one evening, his brow furrowed with what looked like genuine concern. "You seemed confused lately, more forgetful." "I'm fine," I insisted, even though I wasn't sure I was. "Maybe you should see a neurologist," Amber suggested. The word hung in the air like a curse. And concerned. I felt a spike of fear shoot through my chest. My grandmother had early onset dementia. My mother had died of Alzheimer's disease when she was 79. Memory and I'd watched her fade away piece by piece over 6 years. You shouldn't have thought that I might be following that same path, that I might lose myself the same way she had, terrified me more than anything else in the world. "I don't think it's dementia," I said, but my voice sounded weak even to my own ears. "Of course not," Amber said quickly, reaching over to pat my hand. "I'm sure it's nothing serious, but it wouldn't hurt to get checked out, right? Just to be safe. Michael and I would feel so much better if you saw a specialist." So I made an appointment with a neurologist. Dr. Susan Brennan ordered a battery of tests, an MRI, cognitive assessments, blood work, Everything came back normal, but my symptoms persisted and worsened. Dr. Brennan diagnosed me with adulated cognitive decline and suggested I might benefit from occupational therapy and possibly medication to slow the progression. I was devastated. I was 67 years old, and according to this doctor, my mind was already starting to fail me. I'd always prided myself on my sharp memory, my ability to manage complex bookkeeping without a calculator, my organizational skills, and now I was being told that those abilities were slipping away. Amber was sympathetic and attentive in a way that should have comforted me but somehow didn't. She helped me arrange for occupational therapy sessions twice a week. She drove me to appointments because she said she didn't trust me to drive safely anymore with my balance issues. She took over more and more of my household tasks, paying my bills, managing my accounts, organizing my mail. You just focus on your health, Patricia, she said. Let me handle the day-to-day stuff. That's what family does. But she wasn't family. Not really. She'd married my son 3 years ago, and I'd only met her 6 months before the wedding. I barely knew her, yet she was systematically taking over every aspect of my life, and I seemed powerless to stop it. By January, I needed help getting dressed some mornings. My hands shook too much to button my blouses. I'd wake up feeling exhausted even after a full night's sleep. Walking from my bedroom to the kitchen left me breathless and dizzy. I'd forget conversations I'd had just hours before. Gloria came to visit one afternoon and found me staring at my television remote, unable to remember how to change the channel. Patricia, I'm worried about you, she said, her weathered face creased with concern. Gloria was 73, sharp as ever, still teaching Mandarin part-time at the community college. This doesn't seem like normal aging. Have you gotten a second opinion? 2 neurologists now, I said, my words coming out slightly slurred. When had that started? They all say the same thing. Age-related decline, possibly early dementia. You're 67, not 97, Gloria said bluntly. She'd never been one to sugarcoat things, which was one of the reasons I treasured her friendship. This kind of rapid decline isn't normal. What medications are you taking? I gestured vaguely toward the kitchen. Just my regular ones, blood pressure, cholesterol. Amber and Michael organized them for me now. I was getting confused about whether I'd taken them or not. Something flickered across Gloria's face, doubt, suspicion. I couldn't tell. They organized them. You mean they fill your pill organizer? Every Sunday evening, I confirmed. It's very helpful. I don't have to think about it. Gloria didn't say anything else, but I could tell she wanted to. She stayed for an hour, making me tea, talking about her granddaughter's upcoming wedding, trying to keep the conversation light. But I could feel her watching me, assessing me, and I felt a shame I couldn't quite articulate. This vital, intelligent woman was watching me fall apart, and I had no explanation for why it was happening so quickly. After she left, I sat in my living room in the recliner Daniel had bought me for our 30th anniversary, and I cried. Not delicate tears, but the kind of sobbing that comes from deep in your chest, the kind that leaves you gasping and exhausted. I cried for the life I was losing, for the independence that was slipping through my fingers, for the future that seemed to be nothing but decline and dependency. Amber found me there 20 minutes later. Oh, Patricia, she said, her voice dripping with sympathy. It's okay to be scared. This is a hard thing you're going through. But you're not alone. Michael and I are here for you. We're going to take care of you. Those words should have comforted me. Instead, they filled me with a dread I couldn't explain. By February, Amber had hired a home health aide. You need someone here during the day when Michael and I are at work, she explained. Someone who can help you if you fall, who can make sure you eat properly, who can keep an eye on your medications. That's when Rosario came into my life. She was 58, originally from El Salvador, with kind brown eyes and gentle hands. She worked for a home care agency that Amber had found and vetted. She arrived at my house every morning at 8 and stayed until 4, helping me with tasks that I would have been humiliated to need help with just 6 months earlier. But Rosario was different from Amber. Where Amber's concern felt performative and controlling, Rosario's care felt genuine. She talked to me like I was a person, not a patient. She told me about her 3 grown children, about her love of telenovelas, about her garden where she grew tomatoes and peppers. She listened when I talked about Daniel, about raising Michael, about my years working as a bookkeeper. You are a smart woman, she said to me one day in March, watching me struggle to remember the name of my childhood dog. This thing happening to you, it does not make sense. You talk fine when you are not trying to remember things. You understand everything. This is not like my aunt who had Alzheimer's. She could not follow conversations. She would forget who I was. You know everything. You just cannot access it sometimes. That is different." Her words gave me a small spark of hope, but I didn't know what to do with it. The doctors had their diagnoses. The tests showed nothing wrong with my brain structure. The symptoms were real and worsening. What else could it be? In April, things escalated. I fell in the bathroom one morning, my legs simply giving out beneath me as I stepped out of the shower. Rosario called an ambulance, and I spent 2 days in the hospital while they ran more tests. Again, nothing conclusive. The doctors talked about my neurological condition and adjusted my medications, adding a drug that was supposed to help with balance, but instead made me feel even more disconnected from reality. That's when Amber brought up the idea of moving me to assisted living. "I hate to say this, Patricia," she said, sitting on the edge of my hospital bed with Michael standing behind her, "but I don't think it's safe for you to live independently anymore. Even with Rosario there during the day, what happens at night? What if you fall and hurt yourself seriously? We've been looking at some really nice places." "No," I said, the word coming out with a strength that surprised even me. "I'm not leaving my home." "Mom, be reasonable," Michael said, and I could hear Amber's words coming out of his mouth. "You're not capable of living alone anymore. The house is too much for you. You can barely walk from room to room without getting exhausted." "Then I'll sell the house and move into an apartment near you," I countered, grasping at alternatives. Something smaller, easier to manage. Amber and Michael exchanged a look that I couldn't read. "We've actually been thinking about that," Amber said slowly. "About the house. Michael mentioned that you own it outright, right? No mortgage." I nodded, suddenly wary. Daniel and I had worked for 32 years to pay off that mortgage. It was the one thing of value I had left, worth about $450,000 in the current market. "Well, we've been thinking that maybe the best solution would be for you to sign the house over to Michael," Amber continued, her voice carefully casual. "That way, when you move to assisted living, the house won't count against your assets for Medicaid purposes. We could keep it in the family. Michael's your only heir anyway, right? This way just protects it from the nursing home taking it to pay for your care." I stared at her, my mind sluggish, but still functioning enough to recognize what she was suggesting. She wanted me to give them my house, the home I'd lived in for 32 years, the last thing of value I owned, the security that would allow me to afford good care if I really did need it. "I'm not signing my house over to anyone," I said, each word deliberate and clear, despite the tremor in my hands. Amber's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course not, if you don't want to. We're just trying to help you plan ahead. Think about it, okay? There's no rush." But I could hear the rush in her voice, could see it in the way Michael's jaw tightened, in the way they both seemed to lean forward slightly, like predators scenting prey. That night, alone in my hospital room, with only the beep of monitors and the soft squeak of nurses' shoes in the hallway, I felt something shift inside me. Not clarity, exactly, my mind was still too foggy for that, but a stirring of suspicion. A question I was finally allowing myself to ask. What if this wasn't happening randomly? What if someone was making this happen? I dismissed the thought immediately. That way lay paranoia. Michael was my son, the child I'd raised to be honest and kind. He wouldn't hurt me. He couldn't hurt me. But Amber wasn't my child, and I barely knew her. I was released from the hospital 2 days later with strict instructions to use a walker, to have 24-hour supervision, to continue with occupational and physical therapy. Amber hired another aide to cover evenings and nights. Suddenly, I was never alone. Every moment was supervised, monitored, documented. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, and I hated it. In May, on a particularly bad day when I couldn't remember how to work the microwave and had forgotten my own zip code, I broke down in front of Rosario. "I feel like I'm disappearing," I sobbed, the words tumbling out between gasping breaths, "like I'm here but I'm not here, like someone took the real me and left behind this broken thing that can't think or remember or function. I don't understand what's happening to me." Rosario held my hands and let me cry. Then she said something that would change everything. "Miss Patricia, when you take your medicine in the morning, how do you feel after?" I thought about it, trying to focus through the fog. "Dizzy, tired, worse. And during the day, when you have not taken pills for many hours, how do you feel?" Better, I realized. Clearer, still not normal, but better than the mornings. A little better, I admitted. And you take medicine from the organizer that Miss Amber fills. Rosario's voice was carefully neutral, but I could hear the question beneath the question. Yes, every morning. The same 3 pills I've taken for years. The same 3 pills, Rosario repeated. Always, 3 pills, every morning. I nodded, then paused. Wait, why would I question? Sometimes there are 4. She worked in medical billing. Dr. Patel understood medications and health vitamin D. Why would she lie? But Rosario's eyes planted a seed of doubt, and you have spoken to Dr. Patel about my confusion and fear. I hadn't. I should call Dr. Patel. Amber's explanation. Yes, Rosario agreed. You should call Dr. Patel. I called his office that afternoon while Amber was at work, using the phone in my bedroom with Rosario standing guard at the door in case anyone came home early. It took me 3 tries to dial the number correctly. My hands were shaking so badly, but I finally got through to the nurse. Mrs. Callahan, we haven't heard from you in a while. How are you doing? Not well, I admitted. I have a question about my medications. Did Dr. Patel prescribe me a vitamin D supplement? Or anything new in the last few months? Let me check your chart. A pause. No, ma'am, your prescriptions haven't changed since last year. The same 3 you've been on: lisinopril for blood pressure, atorvastatin for cholesterol, and aspirin for cardiac health. Nothing else. The room seemed to tilt. Nothing else. No, ma'am. Is someone telling you differently? No, I lied. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you. I hung up and looked at Rosario, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. There's no supplement. There's no 4th pill. But there's a 4th pill in my organizer. Then what is that pill? Rosario asked quietly. That night, I went to bed early, claiming exhaustion, but I lay awake for hours, listening to Amber and Michael moving around the house, their voices muffled through my bedroom door. Around 10 o'clock, I heard Amber's distinctive laugh, followed by Michael's deeper voice, and then the sound of the kitchen faucet running. They were in my kitchen, doing something, refilling my pill organizer for the next week, probably. My pulse raced as I thought about that 4th pill, the mystery pill that wasn't prescribed by my doctor. What was it? Why were they giving it to me? Sunday morning, I took my pills, as usual, from the organizer. 3 pills and 1 capsule. I held the capsule up to the light, examining it, pink and white, with no markings, not like my prescription pills, which all had numbers and letters stamped on them. I was dizzy within 30 minutes. The room spun. My thoughts scattered. I felt nauseous and weak. That's when I made my decision. I had to know what was in that 4th pill. Over the next week, I became a spy in my own home. When Rosario arrived each morning, I would take my pills but secretly pocket the capsule. I'd wait until I was in the bathroom, alone, and I'd put it in an old jewelry box I kept in the cabinet under the sink. Every day, I saved the capsule. The thing was, on the days I didn't actually take the capsule, I felt better. Not normal. Whatever had been building up in my system for months was still there, but better, clearer, more like myself. By the end of the week, I had 7 capsules hidden in my jewelry box. Rosario, I said on Friday afternoon, I need your help with something important. I told her about to tell someone about feeling better when I didn't take them, and about my call to Dr. Patel's my son and his wife. I showed her the 7 pills that make me sick. Her face grew grave. Everyone thinks I'm losing my mind already. This is very serious. They'll just think I'm paranoid. Dr. Patel, Rosario said firmly. We tell Dr. Patel, he can test these pills. He can help you. So on Monday, while Amber thought I was at my regular physical therapy appointment, Rosario drove me to Dr. Patel's office instead. I brought the 7 capsules in a plastic bag, my hands trembling as I handed them to him. Mrs. Callahan, these are serious accusations, Dr. Patel said, his face troubled. I know, I said, but I need to know what's in these pills, please. I need to understand what's happening to me. He agreed to send them for testing, but he also insisted on running a full toxicology panel on me, which is what led to that conversation where he told me about the diphenhydramine Benadryl. I'd asked, confused, why would someone give me Benadryl? In high doses over extended periods, antihistamines, like diphenhydramine, can cause all the symptoms you've been experiencing, Dr. Patel explained. Confusion, memory problems, dizziness, tremors, cognitive impairment. In elderly patients, it can even mimic dementia. There's a reason we don't recommend these medications for people over 65. The pieces were falling into place with a horror that made my stomach churn. Someone had been systematically drugging me with over-the-counter Benadryl, making me appear cognitively impaired, dependent, incapable. But why? The answer came 3 days later, when the capsule analysis came back. The mystery pills were diphenhydramine, 25 milligrams each, generic Benadryl in a capsule form. I'd been taking one every single morning for months, on top of my regular medications. No wonder I felt dizzy and confused. No wonder I couldn't think clearly. Dr. Patel sat me down with Rosario present and explained what this meant. Someone has been deliberately giving you these pills without your knowledge or consent. This is a form of poisoning, Mrs. Callahan. We need to report this to the authorities. But I wasn't ready. Not yet, because I needed to understand the why. I needed to know if Michael was truly involved or if this was all Amber. And I needed evidence, real, undeniable evidence that would prove what had been done to me. Give me 2 weeks, I asked Dr. Patel. I need to understand what's really happening. Help me get these drugs out of my system, help me think clearly again, and give me 2 weeks to figure out the truth. He was reluctant, but he agreed with strict conditions. I would stop taking anything from the pill organizer immediately. He prescribed me a fresh bottle of my actual medications, which I would keep hidden and take only when I was alone with Rosario. He wanted me to check in with him twice a week, and if I felt I was in any danger, I was to call the police immediately. Over the next 2 weeks, something remarkable happened. I started to feel like myself again. The fog lifted gradually, like watching the sun burn through morning mist. My hands stopped shaking. The dizziness faded. I could walk without holding onto furniture. My memory sharpened. It was like coming back to life after months of being underwater, and with that clarity came a rage so deep and cold that it frightened me. Someone had stolen 7 months of my life. Someone had made me believe I was losing my mind. Someone had convinced doctors, friends, even me, that I had dementia when all I had was a deliberate overdose of over-the-counter medication. And that someone was living in my house, sleeping in my guest room, eating meals at my table, pretending to care for me while systematically destroying me. But I needed proof. I needed to catch them in the act. And I needed to know if Michael was truly part of this or if Amber was acting alone. That's when I became someone I barely recognized, a woman capable of deception, of strategy, of cold calculation. I had to pretend I was still deteriorating while secretly documenting everything. It was the hardest performance of my life. I continued to let Amber fill my pill organizer every Sunday evening. I watched her do it with new eyes, noting how carefully she opened each prescription bottle, how she'd count out the pills, and then so casually, I almost missed it the first time, how she'd open a bottle from her purse and add 1 capsule to each day's compartment. Rosario helped me install a small camera in my kitchen, hidden inside a decorative canister that sat on the counter. The kind of nanny cam that elderly people use to monitor their caregivers, except I was monitoring my own family. That Sunday, the camera captured everything. Amber at my kitchen table, my prescription bottles in front of her, methodically filling the organizer. Then her hand reaching into her purse, pulling out a bottle with no label, extracting 7 pink and white capsules, adding 1 to each day's compartment. The camera even caught her humming softly to herself as she did it, as if this were just another household chore, as mundane as folding laundry or washing dishes. Michael walked into the kitchen halfway through, and my heart clenched as I watched the footage later that night with Rosario. This was the moment that would tell me everything. Was my son complicit? Had the boy I raised become someone capable of poisoning his own mother? Almost done, Michael asked, opening the refrigerator. Just finishing up, Amber replied, snapping the lid shut on the organizer. Your mom's all set for the week. Michael grabbed a beer and turned to leave, then paused. You're remembering to give her the extra supplement, right? The vitamin D. My blood turned to ice. He knew. My son knew there was a 4th pill. But did he know what it really was? Of course, Amber said smoothly. Every single day, her levels will be much better at her next checkup. Michael nodded and left the kitchen. That was it. That was the whole exchange. But it was enough to break my heart into pieces so small, I wasn't sure they could ever be put back together. He knew about the 4th pill. He'd asked about it specifically. Even if he didn't know exactly what it was, he knew Amber was giving me something beyond my prescribed medications, and he'd said nothing. He'd questioned nothing. He'd just accepted it. I sat in my bedroom that night, watching that footage over and over again. tears streaming down my face, while Rosario sat beside me and held my hand. "I'm so sorry, Miss Patricia," she whispered. "I'm so very sorry." The next morning, I took my pills from the organizer in front of Amber, as I'd been doing for months, but the moment I was alone in the bathroom, I spit the capsule into the toilet and flushed it away. Then I took my real medications from the bottle, hidden in the cabinet under my sink. I had the video evidence of Amber adding the mystery pills. I had Dr. Patel's toxicology report showing elevated diphenhydramine in my system. I had the analysis of the pills showing they were antihistamines, not vitamins. But I needed more. I needed to understand the full scope of what they'd been planning. Because people don't just poison their elderly relatives for no reason. There's always a motive. And I was starting to have a very good idea what that motive was. Over the next week, while continuing to pretend I was still confused and dependent, I started paying attention to things I'd been too foggy to notice before. Amber spent a lot of time on her laptop in the evening, and she always closed it quickly when I came into the room. She had frequent phone calls that she'd take in the backyard, speaking in a low voice I couldn't quite hear. She and Michael had quiet, intense conversations late at night that would stop abruptly if they heard my bedroom door open. They were planning something, and whatever it was, it required me to be incapacitated. I confided in Gloria during one of her visits, showing her everything I'd discovered. Her face went through a journey of emotions: shock, horror, rage, and finally a grim determination. "We need to know what they're after," Gloria said. "And I think I know how to find out." Gloria had a nephew who worked in IT security. With my permission, while Amber and Michael were at work and I was supposedly napping, he came to my house and installed monitoring software on the laptop Amber always left in the guest room. Nothing legal. It was my house, my Wi-Fi network, and Gloria's nephew assured me that, as the homeowner, I had the right to monitor devices using my internet connection. What we discovered over the next 3 days made the poisoning almost make sense in a horrible, logical way. Amber had been researching assisted living facilities, but not the nice ones she'd shown me during that hospital visit. These were Medicaid facilities, the bare minimum places where people go when they have no money and no options. She'd filled out preliminary applications to 3 of them, listing me as having advanced dementia, requires total care, no assets, no assets. That was a lie. I had my house, worth $450,000. I had my retirement account, carefully managed over 34 years, worth just over $200,000. I had a life insurance policy, worth $50,000. I wasn't wealthy, but I wasn't destitute. But Amber had also been researching how to become someone's legal guardian. She'd bookmarked articles about declaring elderly people incompetent. She'd read blog posts about transferring assets before Medicaid eligibility. She'd even drafted a document we found it in her email, transferring the deed of my house to Michael Callahan, with a notary appointment scheduled for next month. The plan was becoming clear. Make me appear incompetent through systematic drugging. Get me declared mentally unfit. Become my legal guardian. Transfer all my assets to Michael's name. Then put me in the cheapest facility possible where I'd spend whatever remaining years I had warehoused with minimal care, while they lived in my house and spent my money. It was so calculated, so cold, so complete in its betrayal, that I couldn't breathe when I first read through all the evidence. This wasn't an impulsive crime of opportunity. This was premeditated, planned over months, executed with patience and precision. They'd been poisoning me since October, nearly 8 months, slowly escalating the dosage, making my decline look natural and age-related. "We have enough," Gloria said, her voice shaking with anger. "We call the police right now. We show them everything. They go to prison." But I wasn't ready for that yet, because there was one more thing I needed. I needed to hear them say it. I needed to understand how 2 people who I'd trusted, who I'd let into my home and my life, could justify what they'd done. I needed to hear the words from their own mouths. Dr. Patel was adamant that I'd been off the diphenhydramine long enough that I was thinking clearly. He'd run another toxicology panel, and my levels were normal. My blood pressure was controlled, my cholesterol was fine, and, most importantly, I was lucid, rational, and fully capable of making decisions about my own care. "You're not cognitively impaired, Patricia," he told me in his office, his voice firm. "You never were. You were drugged. There's a significant difference. Any court would see that." Armed with that medical opinion, with the video evidence, with the laptop records, and with Rosario and Gloria as witnesses, I planned my confrontation. It was a Saturday evening in early June, almost exactly 1 year since Michael and Amber had moved into my house for just 6 months. The desert sun was setting, painting my backyard in those familiar oranges and purples, and I'd asked them both to join me on the patio for a family meeting. "Of course, Mom," Michael had said, looking pleased. He probably thought I was finally going to agree to sign over the house. Maybe he thought my deterioration had reached the point where I'd be easy to manipulate into anything. They sat across from me at the patio table where this had all begun. Amber had her perfect smile in place. Michael looked relaxed, confident. Neither of them knew that Rosario was inside with her phone ready to call 911 if needed, or that Gloria was recording everything from her position just inside the patio door, or that I had copies of all the evidence in 3 different locations, including my lawyer's office. "I wanted to talk to you both about something important," I began, proud that my voice was steady. "About my health, and my future, and this house. We're so glad you're ready to have this conversation," Amber said, leaning forward with that concerned expression she'd perfected. "We've been so worried about you." "Have you?" I asked. "How worried, exactly?" Something flickered in Amber's eyes. "What do you mean?" "I mean, how worried have you been about my health? Worried enough to research guardianship laws? Worried enough to fill out applications to Medicaid nursing facilities? Worried enough to schedule a notary appointment to transfer my house deed without my knowledge?" The silence that followed was absolute. Michael's face went pale. Amber's smile froze in place like a mask. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Michael said, but his voice was weak. "I'm talking about the fact that I've been drugged for the past 8 months, I said, each word clear and deliberate. "I'm talking about the pink and white capsules that Amber has been adding to my pill organizer every Sunday. I'm talking about the diphenhydramine Benadryl that's been making me dizzy and confused and forgetful, making me appear to have dementia when I have no such thing." Amber's face had gone from shocked to calculating. "Patricia, you're confused. You're not thinking clearly. This is exactly the kind of paranoid delusion that Dr. Brennan warned us about. Dr. Patel has the toxicology reports showing elevated antihistamine levels in my blood," I interrupted. "He has the pills you've been giving me, analyzed and confirmed to be diphenhydramine. I have video of you adding them to my pill organizer. I have screenshots of your laptop searches about guardianship and asset transfer. I have medical documentation that I am fully competent and have been deliberately poisoned. So please, don't insult me further by pretending this is a delusion." Michael stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the patio stones. "Mom, if this is true, if Amber did something I had no idea, I swear to God, I didn't know." "You asked her about the supplement," I said, my voice breaking despite my determination to stay strong. "Last Sunday, in the kitchen, you asked if she was remembering to give me the extra supplement. You knew there was a 4th pill, Michael. You knew she was giving me something beyond my prescriptions." His face crumbled. "She said it was vitamin D. She said your doctor recommended it but forgot to write a prescription, so she was just picking it up over the counter until your next appointment." I believed her. I didn't question it because why would I? She works in medical billing. She understands medications. "And you were getting worse, Mom. You were forgetting things, falling, getting confused. I thought you really were sick. I thought we were helping you. By researching how to have me declared incompetent. I pulled out the printed emails and documents, slapping them onto the table. By planning to put me in a Medicaid facility while you took my house. By scheduling a notary to transfer the deed. That was helping me." Michael sank back into his chair, his head in his hands. "I don't know anything about that. Amber handled all the paperwork, all the research about your care options. She said it was too stressful for me, that she'd take care of the details." I looked at Amber. She'd gone very still, her face completely blank now. The mask had finally dropped away, and what I saw underneath was cold and hard and utterly without remorse. "You're a clever old woman," she said, her voice flat. "Cleverer than I gave you credit for. I thought you were too far gone to figure it out." "Why?" I asked, the question that had been burning in my chest for weeks. "Why would you do this to me? I let you into my home. I tried to help you." Amber laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Help us? You were taking up space in a house worth $500,000 while Michael and I struggled to save for our own place. Do you know how much rent costs? Do you know what it's like to be in your 30s and have nothing while your mother-in-law sits on a fortune in real estate and retirement accounts? Those are my assets, I said, my voice rising. I worked for them. Daniel and I worked for them for decades. They're meant to support me through my retirement, to pay for my care if I need it. They're not yours. You weren't using them, Amber shot back. You were just sitting here in this house, all alone, wasting space, and Michael's your only child. He'd inherit eventually anyway. I just moved up the timeline. You tried to destroy my mind to steal my house, I said, my voice shaking now with the full weight of my rage. You made me think I was losing myself. You made me afraid of my own brain. Do you have any idea what that's like? To think you're disappearing, piece by piece, to believe you're going down the same path as your mother, to feel yourself slipping away? That fear was worse than physical pain. That fear was torture. It wasn't personal, Amber said with a shrug that made me want to scream. It was practical. You were getting old anyway. You were going to decline eventually. I just accelerated the process. And if you'd cooperated, if you'd just signed the papers and moved into assisted living like we wanted, you would have been perfectly comfortable. Those places aren't that bad. You researched Medicaid facilities, I said. The cheapest ones, places with terrible reviews, places where people go to be forgotten. Because by then, we wouldn't have been able to afford anything better, Amber said, as if this were obvious. Once we transferred your assets, you'd have no money. You'd qualify for Medicaid. That's just logical. I stared at her, this woman my son had married, this stranger who'd sat at my table and smiled while she poisoned me, and I felt something inside me turn to stone. Michael, I said, I thought you were really my eyes off Amber. I thought we were trying to help. Did you know about any of this? The assisted living conversation was about not the lies she told you. Did you know she was drugging from you? No, I never wanted your house like that. His voice barely above a whisper. I never wanted to take anything from you, Mom. But you were willing to pressure me to sign it over, I said. You were willing to stand by while she filled out guardianship papers and nursing home applications. You saw what was happening to me, and you didn't question it. You didn't protect me. You're my son, Michael, my only child, the person who's supposed to be on my side, and you let her do this to me. He was crying now, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry, God, Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I should have questioned more. Should have looked closer. You chose to believe her convenient explanations, but I didn't know. Instead of trusting your own mother, I said. You chose to go along with plans that benefited you financially without examining them too closely. You're responsible for your own choices. You chose her over me. The truth of those words hung in the desert air between us. Michael opened his mouth to protest, to explain, to justify, but nothing came out, because we both knew I was right. I've called the police, I said. They're on their way. I have evidence of everything: the drugging, the false medical claims, the planned asset theft, the fraud. Rosario and Gloria are witnesses. Dr. Patel will testify. Your laptop searches will be subpoenaed, Amber. The video of you adding pills to my organizer will be entered into evidence. You're going to prison. Amber stood up slowly, her face twisted with fury. You vindictive old bitch. I should have used something stronger. I should have just finished the job. You're admitting you tried to harm her. Gloria's voice came from the doorway, her phone held up, still recording. Thank you for making this so much easier. Amber's face went white as she realized her mistake. Michael looked between us, his face a mask of horror and devastation. Michael Callahan, I said formally, my heart breaking with every word. You are no longer welcome in my home. I want you and your wife out of this house tonight. You will take nothing but your personal belongings. If you remove anything else, I will add theft to the charges. Do you understand, Mom? Please, he started, reaching for me. Do you understand? I repeated, pulling away from his touch. Yes, he whispered, I understand. The police arrived 15 minutes later. I gave them copies of all the evidence: the video, the toxicology reports, the pill analysis, the laptop records, Dr. Patel's medical opinion, witness statements from Rosario and Gloria. I walked them through the timeline, explaining everything in clear, coherent detail that proved beyond any doubt that I was mentally competent. Amber was arrested that night and charged with elder abuse, poisoning, fraud, and attempted theft. Michael wasn't charged. The prosecutor agreed that while his behavior was negligent and morally reprehensible, they couldn't prove he knew about the drugging specifically. But he was named in my civil suit for the costs of my care, the medical expenses, and emotional damages. The court case took 8 months. Amber tried to claim I'd consented to the medications, that I was confused about what I'd agreed to, that I really did have dementia and was paranoid, but the evidence was overwhelming. Dr. Patel's testimony was damning. He explained in clinical detail how someone with actual dementia wouldn't have been able to plan and execute the kind of evidence gathering I'd done, how my symptoms had completely resolved once I stopped taking the diphenhydramine, how the levels in my system were consistent with daily dosing over months. The video of her adding pills to my organizer was played in court. Her laptop searches were entered into evidence. Rosario testified about how my symptoms improved on days when I didn't actually swallow the capsule. Gloria testified about the dramatic change in my cognition once I'd been off the drugs for 2 weeks. Amber was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 6 years in prison. She showed no remorse during sentencing, just glared at me with cold hatred as they led her away in handcuffs. Michael came to court every day. He sat in the back row and watched everything unfold. After the sentencing, he tried to approach me in the hallway, but I turned away. I wasn't ready. I might never be ready. The civil suit was settled out of court. Michael's lawyer convinced him to agree to a sum that covered all my medical expenses, Rosario's salary for the months she'd helped me, Gloria's nephew's IT work, my legal fees, and a substantial amount for pain and suffering. In total, he paid me $93,000. I knew it destroyed his savings, his emergency fund, everything he'd been trying to build, but I felt no sympathy. He'd been willing to let his wife destroy me for financial gain. Now he could experience what it felt like to lose everything. The hardest part wasn't the trial or the settlement. It was the aftermath, the silence where my son used to be. Michael sent letters. I didn't open them. He called. I didn't answer. He came to my house twice, and both times I had Gloria turn him away at the door. I couldn't look at him without seeing him standing in that kitchen, asking Amber if she'd remembered to give me my supplement, casually complicit in my systematic destruction. Some people, well-meaning friends, even Rosario, suggested I should forgive him, that he'd been manipulated by Amber, that he deserved a second chance. But forgiveness isn't something you can force. It's not a switch you flip because someone expects you to. And I wasn't ready to flip that switch. Maybe I never would be. I thought about all the sacrifices I'd made for Michael over the years. When he was 6 and needed braces, I worked a second job on weekends for 2 years, giving up my Saturday art classes and Sunday rest to pay for the orthodontist. That cost me $12,000 and my only hobby. When he was 15 and wanted to go to computer camp in California, I sold my mother's pearl necklace, the only valuable jewelry I owned, to pay the $3,000 tuition. When he was 23 and his first apartment required last month, and security deposit, I loaned him $4,500 that he never fully paid back. I'd given him everything I had to give, financially and emotionally, because that's what mothers do. And he'd repaid me by standing aside while his wife poisoned me. The bitterness of that truth sat in my chest like a stone, heavy and cold and immovable. But there were bright spots in the aftermath. Rosario continued to work for me, though now as a companion rather than a caregiver, helping with heavy housework and driving me to appointments, not because I couldn't manage alone but because it was nice to have the company. We became true friends, attending movies together, sharing meals, laughing over our favorite telenovelas. Gloria was my rock, as she'd been for 30+ years. She'd moved into my guest room for the first month after Amber's arrest, refusing to leave me alone while I processed everything that had happened. We drank wine on my patio and talked late into the night. Her fierce loyalty and unwavering support helping me remember that not everyone in my life was toxic. Dr. Patel continued to monitor my health closely. All my symptoms had resolved completely. My memory was sharp, my balance perfect, my thinking clear. I was, as he put it, a completely healthy 60-year-old woman who'd been through hell and come out the other side. I sold the house 18 months after Amber's conviction. I couldn't live there anymore. Every room held memories that had been poisoned up by the diphenhydramine, but by the knowledge of what had been done to me within those walls. I bought a smaller condo in a 55+ community, a bright, modern space with 2 bedrooms, a view of the mountains, and no ghosts of betrayal lurking in the corners. The money from selling the house, $475,000 after fees and commissions, went into a trust managed by my lawyer, with strict instructions that only I could access it. No one else had signing authority. Not family, not friends, not anyone. I would never again be vulnerable to someone stealing my security. I started painting again, the hobby I'd given up when Michael was 6 to pay for his braces. Watercolors of desert landscapes, bold and bright. Some were good enough that I sold them at local art fairs, which gave me a deep satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. Creating something beautiful, something that was mine alone, something that no one could take from me. I volunteered at a senior advocacy center, helping other elderly people navigate the complex world of healthcare, legal rights, and family dynamics. I told my story carefully, without names, but honestly to groups of seniors who needed to understand the warning signs of elder abuse. I helped 3 different people recognize that they were being financially exploited by family members. I sat with a 76-year-old man while he reported his grandson for forging checks. I held hands with an 82-year-old woman as she confronted her daughter about stealing her jewelry. I turned my pain into purpose, and that helped more than any therapy could have. On the 2-year anniversary of that conversation with Dr. Patel the day he showed me what Amber had been putting in my medicine, I sat on my new patio and took stock of my life. I was 70 years old. I was healthy. I was financially secure. I had good friends who'd proven their loyalty through crisis. I had my art and my volunteer work and my freedom. What I didn't have was my son. Michael had stopped trying to contact me after the first year. His letters stopped coming. The phone calls ceased. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd moved to Colorado, taken a job with a different aerospace company, started over in a place with no memories. He'd divorced Amber while she was in prison. The paperwork filed before her trial even ended. Sometimes, late at night, I wondered what he was doing, if he ever thought about me, if he'd found happiness, or if the guilt ate at him the way the betrayal ate at me, if he'd learned anything from what had happened, or if he'd just blamed Amber for everything and absolved himself of responsibility. I wondered if I would ever be able to forgive him, and I wondered if it mattered whether I could or not. Because here's what I learned from those terrible months. Some betrayals are so profound that they change the fundamental nature of a relationship. You can't go back to what you were before because the person you were before no longer exists. The mother who trusted her son implicitly, who never questioned his motivations, who believed he'd always protect her, that woman died on the day I watched him ask Amber about my supplement and never thought to verify what it actually was. The woman I became in her place was harder, warier, less willing to sacrifice for others at the expense of myself. Some people might call that bitter. I call it wise. I thought I knew my son until the doctor showed me what his wife had been putting in my medicine. But the real revelation wasn't about the pills. It was about the willful blindness, the convenient ignorance, the choice to accept easy answers instead of asking hard questions. It was about how love and trust can be weaponized against you, how the people closest to you have the most power to harm you, and how sometimes the person you need protection from is the last person you'd ever suspect. Michael sent me one final letter on my 70th birthday. I almost threw it away unopened, but something made me break the seal. Dear Mom, I know you probably won't read this. I know I don't deserve for you to read this. But it's your 70th birthday, and I can't let it pass without saying something. I'm sorry. I know I've said that before. I know it's not enough. I know it doesn't fix anything. But I need you to know that I understand now what I did. Not just what Amber did, what I did. I was willfully blind because it was easier than confronting hard truths. I was complicit through my silence and my failure to protect you. I chose comfort over courage, and you paid the price. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not asking for reconciliation. I just want you to know that I carry the weight of what happened every single day. I wake up with it. I go to sleep with it. It's changed who I am, and maybe that's appropriate. Maybe I needed to be changed. I hope you're well. I hope you're happy. I hope you've found peace. Even if I never do, I love you. I will always love you, even though I have no right to say so anymore. Michael. I read the letter 3 times, sitting at my kitchen table, with tears streaming down my face. Was it enough? Could it ever be enough? Did understanding and remorse make up for what he'd allowed to happen? I didn't know. But I folded the letter carefully and put it in a drawer, and I didn't throw it away. That had to mean something. 3 months later, on a warm December afternoon, I picked up my phone and sent Michael a text message. Just 3 words. Thank you, Mom. He responded within minutes. Thank you for reading it. I don't deserve your acknowledgement, but I'm grateful for it anyway. We didn't start a regular correspondence. We didn't rush into reconciliation, but we'd opened a door, just a crack, just enough to let in the possibility that someday, maybe, we might find our way to some new version of a relationship. Not the one we had before that was gone forever, but perhaps something else. Something built on truth instead of assumption. On earned trust instead of blind faith. On the hard lessons learned through devastation. I don't know if we'll ever get there, but I'm willing to try, which is more than I ever thought I'd be able to say. Meanwhile, I have my life. My real, full, independent life. I paint and volunteer and laugh with Rosario over coffee and debate politics with Gloria on weekend mornings. I take classes at the community college art history and creative writing and conversational Spanish. I'm learning who I am when I'm not defined by motherhood, when I'm not sacrificing for someone else, when I'm just Patricia, a woman in her 70s with a past that includes both joy and pain, both trust and betrayal. I'm learning that survival isn't the same as recovery, but recovery is possible if you're willing to do the work. I'm learning that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing, but it might mean releasing the poison of constant anger because that poison hurts you more than anyone else. I'm learning that family is sometimes the people you're born with and sometimes the people you choose, and the second kind might actually be more reliable than the first. Most of all, I'm learning that I'm stronger than I ever knew. I survived months of being systematically drugged. I had the clarity and courage to investigate what was happening, even when everyone around me thought I was losing my mind. I gathered evidence and built a case and confronted my abusers and won justice in a court of law. I rebuilt my life from the rubble of betrayal. If I can do that, I can do anything. Sometimes people ask me if I'm afraid it will happen again, if I'm paranoid now about trusting people, if I live in constant fear of being victimized. The answer is complicated. Yes, I'm more cautious. Yes, I verify everything and keep control of my own medications and financial affairs. Yes, I'm aware, in a way I never was before, that people can smile at you while plotting your destruction, but I'm not afraid. Fear would mean they won, that Amber and Michael's betrayal had turned me into someone small and cowering and suspicious. Instead, I'm vigilant. There's a difference. Vigilance is active and empowering. It means I'm paying attention, that I'm protecting myself, that I've learned from experience without letting that experience destroy me. I know my own strength now. I know my own worth. And I know that I deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, that my needs matter, that my safety matters, that my life has value beyond what I can provide for other people. That knowledge, hard-won through those terrible months, is the gift that came wrapped in poison. I wouldn't choose to go through it again. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But having survived it, having come out the other side, I'm grateful for what it taught me about resilience and self-worth and the fierce determination to protect what's mine. I thought I knew my son until the doctor showed me what his wife had been putting in my medicine. But what I really learned was something much more important. I thought I knew myself, and I was wrong about that too. I was stronger than I believed, braver than I imagined, and more capable than I'd ever given myself credit for being. And that knowledge, that deep, unshakable understanding of my own strength, is something no one can ever take from me. Not with pills, not with lies, not with betrayal. It's mine, earned through fire, and it will carry me through whatever years I have left. I'm Patricia Callahan. I'm 70 years old. I was poisoned by my daughter-in-law and failed by my son, and I survived. That's my story. Not the story of what was done to me, but the story of what I did in response. Not the story of betrayal, but the story of reclamation. Not the story of victimhood, but the story of victory. I survived. I reclaimed my life. I found myself again, not the version of me that existed before all this happened, but a new version, a stronger version, a version that knows her own worth and refuses to settle for less than she deserves. And if that's not a happy ending, it's at least a true one. And truth, I've learned, is worth more than any comfortable lie.